Welcome everyone. Thank you Mohitji for organizing this, and a New Year Sunday, and all of us are here. It shows that Gita has a certain something about itself which pulls people in. And I welcome you all to this session organized by the City Book Leaders, the Rashram School of Public Leadership, Rishihood University, and Rupa Publications. I'm Sahil Agarwal. I'm sitting in Sonipat, the historic Swarnprasth. The dialogue between Arjun and Krishna happened not very far from here, just 2 hours away, and I feel very lucky to be a part of this conversation and learn from the discussions today. To begin with, we'll have an auspicious shlok recitation by Ananya Giriji. Ananya ji is a Sanskrit teacher at the Seth M.R. Jaipuria School in Lucknow. She is trained by Professor Sampadanand Mishra ji, who is one of the globally renowned scholars on Sanskrit and also a professor at our university. So Ananya ji, I'll request you for shlok recitation.
Thank you. पश्यामि देवांस्तव देवदेहे सर्वांस्तथा भूतविशेषसङ्घान् ब्रह्माण्डमीशं कमलासनस्थं ऋषींश्च सर्वानुरगांश्च दिव्यान् न रूपमस्येह तथोपलभ्यते नान्तो न चादिर्न च सम्प्रतिष्ठा अश्वत्थमेनं सुविरूढमूलम् असङ्गशस्त्रेण दृढेन चित्वा गतसङ्गस्य मुक्तस्य ज्ञानावस्थितचेतसः यज्ञायाचरतः कर्म समग्रं प्रविलीयते मन्मना भव मद्भक्तो मत्याजी मां नमस्कुरु मामे वैष्यसि सत्यं ते प्रतिजाने प्रियोऽसि मे सर्वधर्मान् परित्यज्य मामेकं शरणं व्रज अहं त्वा सर्वपापेभ्यो मोक्षयिष्यामि मा शुचः यत्र योगेश्वरः कृष्णो यत्र पार्थो धनुर्धरः तत्र श्रीर्विजयो भूतिः ध्रुवानीतिर्मतिर्मम ध्रुवानीतिर्मतिर्मम. धन्यवाद.
Thank you so much, Ananya ji. That was really very, very soothing. So for the opening keynote, we have none other than Shri Gaurang Prabhuji. Gaurang ji is a leadership and mindfulness coach, a graduate from IIT Bombay. He quickly found his calling and became a monk. He's dedicated to helping people transform their hearts, improve their attitudes, and establish sustainable spiritual communities and drive positive change in the society. He's a governing body commission member of ISKCON. He's the director of the Govardhan Eco Village, a unique and large-scale sustainability project near Mumbai. We have hosted our team training there, and I encourage everyone to visit their serene campus. And of course, we have been very fortunate to have Gaurangji's mentorship for several years now. Gaurangji, I request you for the keynote.
Thank you so much, Sahil, and thanks to your team and to all the wonderful authors who have actually helped make this happen. Best wishes to all of you. As Bhagavad Gita is a book of knowledge which specifically focuses on 5 topics: Ishwar, Jeev, Prakriti, Kala, Karma. The Supreme Lord, the Jiva, the soul, material nature, Kala is time, and Karma is action. How do we integrate all of these in the midst of our busy life? So all of us have 4 very pressing tendencies. First is we have a need to control. We try to control others. We try to control the ambience and surroundings around us. All of us try to control things beyond our capacity. But there is a limit to our ability to control. The second is all of us have an ability or an obsession to consume. So Shaknoti haiva yah sodam prak sharira vimokshanat kam krododbhom vegam sahayukta sukhina. When we have a tendency to consume, then we get obsessed with various sense objects, and that drives us totally crazy. Therefore, we see that across the world, we are paying the price of unbridled consumption patterns, and the world is on the brink of a huge collapse due to climate change. Third is we have a tendency to compete. So we try to compete and outdo others and try to prove that I'm better than others. This tendency to compete was at the very root cause of the conflict between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, because Duryodhan, by definition, means a personality who's always fighting for the wrong cause. Yodhan means to fight, Du means the wrong. And therefore, the main inspiration for Duryodhan's fight was to establish that I am superior to the Pandavas. When a person is influenced and inflamed by ego, then he loses control over his senses and over his own self. And therefore, Duryodhan was requested for 5 villages by the Pandavas. But because of the influence of the ego, he would not allow that. And therefore, the tendency to compete actually is a huge handicap which affects us and debilitates us to a great degree. Fourth is, all of us have a tendency to convince others. We feel that I know my opinion is the best, and we try to establish our convictions over others and try to convince others. So many fights and conflicts are happening all over the world, right from a domestic level to the global and international level, because each person wants to establish his opinion as superior to others. So the need to convince, the obsession to convince others seems to be a major urge. So therefore, when you look at these 4 urges, which I call as Vega Sahishnuta, Paramata Sahishnuta, Parotkarsha Sahishnuta, and what typically a person understands in terms of control, these are the things we need to actually overcome. And the Bhagavad Gita is a literature which is helping us conquer over our tendency to control, our tendency to consume, our tendency to convince, and our tendency to compete. And if we are able to practice the Bhagavad Gita in our lives, then we will be able to rise above all the conflicts which are happening within us. And then the external conflicts, the nature may go on changing, but we have ability to control that. Therefore, the Gita has been spoken in the context of one of the most powerful expert warriors, Arjuna, who has the ability to fight and conquer all kinds of enemies externally. But suddenly he found himself in a situation where he could not conquer over some of his doubts internally. So the Gita posits very strongly that first develop the ability to conquer your internal enemies, conflicts and doubts, and then develop conviction and confidence. And then with that, you will actually be able to conquer over any kind of external situation, however dynamic and changing it may be. So I thank all of you for inviting me this morning and wish your conference best wishes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gaurangdi. Actually, you are living embodiment of the knowledge that Gita has to offer to all of us. And you yourself being an author and developing the Govardhan Eco Village, now I'm thinking that we at City Book Leaders also need to create a village book leaders, vertical and promote the knowledge that is coming from so many parts of the world. But at City Book Leaders, our objective is to promote books, to promote the knowledge that is there in the books, to create conversation around books. And for that, we have 2 very special authors today with us. I'll introduce both of them. Rahul is a banker by the day and writer by the night. He is an expert at connecting 3 I's: ideas, insights, and individuals. Hailing from Ayodhya, he received a full scholarship to study engineering at the NTU Singapore and has an MBA from IIM Bangalore. He's the youngest ever president of IIM Bangalore Alumni Association in Singapore and serves as the principal corporate advisory group at IIM Udaipur. He regularly speaks at corporates and universities on topics that concern millennials, such as careers in 21st century, conscious capitalism, and cross-cultural understanding. He has authored An Atheist Gets the Gita and Engineering to Ikigai. That sounds very interesting. And You Know the Glory, Not the Story. Thank you so much, Rahul, for joining us. We also have the other author of this book, Galina Kogut. She's a researcher with the National Institute of Education and has a PhD from the NTU, Singapore. She focuses on pedagogy and specific emphasis on language acquisition and teacher professional development. Born in Ukraine, Galina has widely researched and taught Western psychology as well as Eastern philosophies. She has translated various Indian scriptures into Eastern European languages and authored digital storytelling for educative purposes. And An Atheist Gets the Gita, of course. She's the president of the Ukrainian Club in Singapore and was the founder of Ukrainian Language School, Singapore. So two very interesting, very different backgrounds coming together to write a book which has a very interesting title. So I want to start with that. And Rahul, the first question is for you, that the title sounds like an oxymoron. Why is an atheist reading the Gita?
Yeah, and that is actually the essence of the book. Why is an atheist reading the Gita? Well, I would just say that, we live in an era where monks are selling Ferrari, right? So why can't an atheist read the Gita? And jokes apart, let me just say that actually there are no prerequisites for reading the Gita. I know of murderers, I know of criminals, I know of thieves who have read the Gita and come out transformed. It's such a transformational book. That is the power of the Bhagavad Gita. And in fact, I would go on to say that an atheist is the most qualified person to read the book. Why? Because an atheist comes with a clean slate, no baggage at all. And in Hindi, as you know, there are two words, janna and manna, right? So, janne ke liye, to know. In order to know, you need that logical, scientific mind. So, to that effect, I would say an atheist who comes with no baggage at all, with an absolute clean mind, is the perfect person to receive the Bhagavad Gita. And yes, once an atheist starts reading the Gita, it's a very logical, scientific book, as you know, and a transformation is waiting for you on the other side. So with that, I will submit my submission. Maybe Galina, you can add on to your version of why an atheist should be reading a Gita or should not be reading a Gita.
I want to add a precursor to Galina's comment before I ask her. So she was born in USSR, which was officially an atheist country. So what was it like growing up there, and how did you actually come across something like Gita?
Well, yeah, it's interesting how you put it, because it's exactly the way I explain to people when they ask me, how did you get to know about all of this knowledge? So I was, I spent my formative years in the USSR, and it was an officially an atheist country. So you are supposed to believe that there is no God. So whatever we are talking about, whoever we believe in, we still have to believe in something. Yeah. So over there, they'll just tell you that, look, there's no God. Life comes from the Big Bang. It goes to nowhere. So if you don't believe in this, too bad for you, we will deal with you. But interestingly, you can't force people what to believe and what not to believe, and in our quest for the essence of life, for the sense of life, in our search for our internal I, what I am, why am I here, nobody can stop us. So in my childhood, even though my parents were convinced that atheism is not the way, and there was a lot of people like that, they wouldn't tell the kids, there is God, don't listen to all this, because the kids can just come out, blurt something, and then the parents lose their job next day. So we were just living in this blissful kind of situation where we wouldn't get much information about the matters of God, the matters of the universe, how technically we are supposed to, the only way is that life comes from matter, and matter is the main thing. So you're matter and nothing else. So, and when you die, there is nothing else. So there is no spiritual things, there's only matter. So this is the kind of religion we had. But I was looking for a little bit more profound explanation than just the matter, because it just really sounded very unfair to me. Luckily, I guess it was in the early 80s, or maybe before that, or maybe in middle 80s. There were the so-called Hare Rama Hare Krishna people who smuggled the Bhagavad Gita into the USSR. And they were actually taking risk. They were risking their lives because if caught, they would end up in jail forever, until. But somehow, I guess there was protection from above, and these books, they somehow managed to land in the USSR, and under the great threat of being expelled from schools, universities, jobs, people were disseminating this kind of knowledge. So my first Gita was actually a typewritten copy of the some Western edition of Bhagavad Gita. It was translated, like very basic translation, and it was typewritten, and it was like sort of like self-published book, like very crude edition, but that was precious. Yes, so it was giving answers to the questions, and not to me, to many people. Yeah, so we that's how we got it from. So ever since, we don't take it for granted.
That's very fascinating and interesting, and especially like the smuggling part. And we'll have to probably ask Gaurang Prabhuji sometime that how did they manage to take it inside USSR and inspire people like you who are now following this so actively.
Sahilji, I can probably add a little bit there. So you because you asked that question, I'm not sure if Gaurang Prabhu is still on the forum, but Bhaktivedanta Sri Prabhupada went to Russia, and he brought a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, and he was actually arrested when he brought that copy of the Bhagavad Gita, and was actually going to be thrown to the jail for rest of his life. And fortunately, the officer who arrested him, he saw what he had, and he said, okay, not a life imprisonment offense, so let him go. I mean, it's just by sheer luck.
Sheer luck, yes.
but it could have been any other officer, and the story could have been totally different.
Yeah.
And that is, when I listen to what Galina says, what fascinates me is that, for us, Sahilji, I think you're born in India as well. I'm born in India. For us, Bhagavad Gita is so readily available, and yet we don't understand the value of it. It's readily available, but we don't accessibility on one side, but reading it on the other side. We don't read it. Whereas there are people in the world who would not even have access to this book, and just to get access to this knowledge, they have to go to such lengths to have a book smuggled in a typewritten format, in a crude paper. I can't imagine. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. Somebody like Prabhupada would risk his life just so that this knowledge is available.
Yeah, highly inspiring. So before we move forward, I want to know, how did you meet each other? Was it because of the Gita, or you already knew each other and then you came across Gita? What happened?
Yeah, that's a serendipitous thing. So I met Gita not Gita. I met Galina before I met Gita, actually. So I met Galina in 2008 in NTU campus. We are both in the same campus, and I think I will let Galina answer that. She probably has a better version of this.
Whatever version, it sort of like was interesting to talk to. Rahul is generally a very intellectual person, but he did come across to me as a very westernized, Western educated Indian who was like, rolling his eyes when I was saying something about the greatness of India, and he was like, yeah. So we ended up just talking about the general philosophy matters, not really going into and then the first thing which he managed to, the first message which he managed to bring across to me is that he doesn't believe in God. Well, I was really bewildered. Why do you need to tell me that? I mean, do I really? But it's very interesting that we generally found each other very interesting people to talk to and to have intellectual conversations. And I never really impose my views of, because I'm a Bhakti yoga follower. So I never really imposed my views on him, and he never really imposed his atheist views on me. Because to me, atheism I had a very contradictory idea about what is atheists are. So I mean, we've seen people in the USSR who atheist meant somebody who destroys things, who destroys values, who imposes things, who is generally a dur person, duryodhan, the bad person, doing the bad things. But at the same time, when I was studying in the university, one of the most important lessons, we had a subject which was called History of Religions. And definitely, like, we know that whoever follows which religion, they would always tell you mine is the best, you know. So the most important lesson which was given to me was by an atheist, our lecturer, who was proclaiming himself an atheist. He was telling us that he strongly believes that all religions are good and perfect for whoever they're suitable for. It's only humans, when they interfere with the twisted knowledge, when they take the knowledge twisted and produce it in the way which is convenient for them, this is when the problem starts. So, and I was actually very respectful of this guy who actually could have this sort of like impartial perspective towards all different religions. And that was true. I mean, in my life, I realized that it was true. So, going back to both of us. And then all of a sudden, after some time, Rahul comes and he tells me, oh, you know, there is karma, you know, and some other things. Oh, you know what happens when, and I'm like, yeah, I know. So, so that was interesting. So he was sort of like discovering things and sharing with me the things which I already knew, and which I felt a little bit guilty that I never really tell him anything about it. So he had to go hard way of looking for all the bits and pieces of knowledge here and there. But I still think that this is the best way, because if something is given very easily, then it's not valued. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So I'll just add a little bit to that. This entire session is serendipitous, I would say, because one of the disciples of Gauranga Prabhu was in Singapore, and he's a senior banker at one of the banks here. He used to be a senior banker, and I met him also through an accident, I would say, or serendipitously. And in that course of discussion, we had some discussion, and then he invited me over to his home, and he used to host these satsang kind of sessions, and I liked the way those sessions were and how he used to explain things. And through him, I picked up some bits and pieces of the Bhagavad Gita, some here and there. And then Galina, having the benefit of the training that she had, she obviously knew much deeper about this. So I used to then ask her about, I mean, whatever to me, it was a revelation. So I used to come and discuss with her, okay, you know, because Galina and I used to discuss a lot about philosophy and intellectual matters. And then
we still do.
We still do. And in that course of discussion, what was coming to me as a revelation, to her, it was a matter of fact, like, so because she has obviously had like maybe a decade of training into this, and she knows all this. So how we came together to write this book was essentially, you see, on one side, you have very qualified books and commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, as deep as you want to go into the philosophy of life, into the practicality of life, into how you should lead your life. And as Gauranga Prabhu was saying, Bhagavad Gita is essentially an instruction manual which talks about those 5 things, right? Which is basically how a jiva is soul, interacts with Prakriti, which is the material nature, in Kala, which is time, governed by the laws of karma. In karma, we know to a certain extent, which are designed by the Ishvara, or the supreme control. That's what it is, basically. So in that sense, you will have lots and lots of books which talk about. In fact, just this New Year Eve, I was watching this movie Guide 1965, both in English and in Hindi, and it has the same message about what Atman is, what Brahman is, and how the Atman never dies, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to essentially say here is that on one side, you have such very qualified, deep knowledge sitting in India. And on the other side, there are people like myself who are educated in predominantly a Western heavy education system, which totally never talks to you about these things. And yet it kind of, you're deprived of this. And then in order for you to make this leap from this Western educated brain to this highly nuanced understanding of Bhagavad Gita, it's quite a big jump. You need a bridge in the middle. And for me, that bridge happened over a course of 5 years or longer. And then I thought, okay, now that I have gotten this knowledge, is there a way I can package this in a way which can maybe benefit others who are like me, who are maybe not likely to pick up this knowledge, but may by chance, if they pick up, benefit from this. And in that course of discussion, I had some intuitive understanding. I used to discuss with Galina, and I used to say, look, I think intuitively it is going to be like this. Do you have a scriptural backing for this? Do you know where I can pick this up? And then she used to say, yeah, pick that Upanishad, pick that Purana in that verse, or so and so's commentary will have it. So she gave me the flesh to the mere fragile structure that I had, that, okay, I need a depth in this. And then she gave that depth, so it was like, we were feeding onto each other. I had that curiosity, she had that intellectual depth, and then it kind of, the book came together. And if you read the book, you will see that it is somewhat in that fashion.
I'm eagerly looking forward to reading the book, and this collaboration between a person who is on a sort of a Gyan Yogi direction and the person who is on a Bhakti Yoga direction. It's very interesting to see the complementary collaboration that you both bring together to create such a wonderful book. I want you to elaborate a little more on why you felt this book fulfills a gap, and what was the reaction from publisher? Did you go to some more publishers? Because I mean, Gita itself, there is a book, and then there are so many other books about the book. So when you decided that you should write it, what kind of challenges you faced, or what was that introspection that was going on whether you will be able to come up with a book that adds to this?
So Sahil, first of all, ironically enough, my discovery of Indian philosophy or Gita is a reverse discovery from a foreigner to an Indian, right? I mean, in all essence, it is that. And if I were to add in a foreign land, I got this outside of India, whether it was Singapore or somewhere else. Switzerland was the first place where I ever first saw ISKCON temple, if I could just add on to what I was saying. So the idea of book did not come overnight. What actually happened is that, as I was saying, there was a very senior banker from whom I had received this knowledge. And when I had received this, then I thought, okay, I'm going to impart this to more people. And when that thought came to my mind, I kind of designed a course, which I have also taught in some of the IIMs. But during the pandemic, when the lockdown just happened, early 2000, Galina and I collaborated, and we started giving this lecture to whoever was interested. And a lot of people joined. Initially, it was physical, but then we had to shift to online version because you could no longer meet. That was the prevailing restriction. And towards the end of that lecture, some people suggested that, look, not everybody will have access or the time to go through your course. Why don't you package it as a book? And at that time, I was working on my book on Ikigai. Galina was working on her book on the dialogic teaching book that we just heard it and we just didn't think about it. But then I think that seed was planted somewhere subconsciously in our mind. And then we thought, yeah, why not? So we started writing. I started writing, and I used to consult Galina, and we started helping each other see how this would come together. And then we sent out the manuscript. And believe it or not, the first version was written in just 40 days with full-time jobs. Just 40 days with full-time job. So the first version we send out, of course, with a lot of hopes, but with no expectations. That's number one thing which Gita teaches you. Don't have expectations, do your karma. And fortunately enough, in less than 2 weeks, Rupa came back, said they are interested. And that got us very excited. And then we discussed with Rupa, and at that time the book had we had sent them 3 chapters, and they said send us the entire manuscript. And then they said, yeah, we are going ahead and publishing this. And then we discussed more that, okay, the book currently has 30,000 words. We need to make it slightly longer. We need to make it 50,000 words. That's when we started like putting more nuances, in depth into the whole thing. But I don't know. It could have been a lot more difficult to publish the book, but somehow I think it wasn't. In fact, my other book, the Ikigai book, for which I went from pillar to post to every Indian publisher, that took me a year to find a publisher. Anyways, Galina, what's your take on this?
To me, it happened like a dream, honestly, because I guess the road to the book was much more. Was much longer. The road to the book itself was much longer than the writing of the book and even getting the publisher. Because for like, I think that what Rahul, why would somebody who is Western educated, so much oriented on the Western sort of like educational values, why would he even start writing this book? I guess the important thing was to find the right person to hear from. And the way, like before this whole thing even started, before we two of us started giving lectures on Bhagavad Gita to others, more Rahul. I mean, I was also listening whenever I could, but because we have like I'm busy with a small kid and other things, so that we listened to the way Gita was presented in a very concise and very useful way for somebody who would be who you expect to be Western educated and who wouldn't take all these, like who would be listening to facts, who will be listening to scientific facts behind the Bhagavad Gita, not just Krishna lala, Rama lala, and do bhakti. I mean, this is how bhakti is perceived. You just do Krishna bol Krishna lala, and that's it. And then you'll get bhakti. But that's not the way. And nobody is actually like when you talk to the spiritual teachers, they wouldn't encourage you to be so illiterate and just dance around and do lala. So I mean, you do dance around when you're happy, but you also have to know the knowledge behind it. So. The way we were listening to Bhagavad Gita from Sumanji, it was a very, very scientific. So I guess this whole process was much longer than the Gita itself. So we just wrote it very quickly. And to me, finding the publisher was sort of like a dream, honestly. Rahul is just telling me, oh, look, they told us they're going to publish our book. I'm like, wow, what? That's it.
I think the way I sense it is the message of the Gita of preparing the person within you. I think that preparation happened for both of you for a long time before you actually got on to the publication part. So I think in a way the Gita prepared you to publish it so quickly. And since both of you are serial authors and speedy authors, probably will need to do another session on how to write a book itself, because there are many people within our community who are interested in writing. So thanks for sharing those perspectives.
Happy to do that, Sahil, but I'll just add one more thing, which I think we kind of didn't answer right into the heart of it. Why another book on Gita? So you see, this book, I would say, is somebody who doesn't want to read Gita. It is actually for somebody who doesn't want to read Gita, who is most likely not ever going to read Gita. So there is no point for us to convince somebody who is already convinced about the Gita. That person will go and pick up the original Bhagavad Gita, maybe can read Sanskrit, maybe cannot read Sanskrit, but that's not a limitation. You have so many translations. So excuse me, this book is for someone who is logical, someone who is curious, yet may never have the need or the realization to read the Gita. So this is a book which will pick your curiosity in a very scientific manner, in a very management-like way. So the way the whole book is presented is as a series of laws and management frameworks. That's all it is.
I just to add to this, I had the instance from real life, like when I got this. I told you, like, we were reading the smuggled books in a very bad condition, no aesthetics, and it's only after collapse of the USSR, when they started printing these books, like proper translating and printing. So I think a few years down the road, we had this the first ISKCON temple in our city, so we could come and discuss Gita and all. And then we had medical students from India. And then there was one guy who was like medical university educated, and we show him, this is Bhagavad Gita. Oh, we are so proud of it. Would you like to read it? And he looks at us and he says, why would I read it? I live 10 kilometers from where Kurukshetra happened. So and then we are like, so? And he's like, I know everything. So basically his message was that we can't tell him more than he already knows, you know, and we honestly were very, very surprised. Yeah, so yeah.
Well, that's also a very interesting part of this story, because how, and Rahul was also describing it, this approach of telling someone not to do something, definitely ignites the curiosity of now I definitely want to do it. So this approach of an atheist getting the Gita and the titling and the content of the book, I'm sure it must ignite curiosity in so many people. And you were mentioning about the medical student. I think there are so many people like this who question, or who genuinely don't know the relevance of Gita in today's world. So I want to ask Galina, because this is something that was written 5,000 years ago, and this will be the last question from my side before we take the questions from the audience. 5,000 years ago, this was a dialogue, and why do you think it is still relevant? Coming from as a person who has encountered this in a very foreign, very different kind of a land, what do you think is the relevance today?
Well, I mean, I can speak from my perspective why it is relevant to me, and I can be taking as a general case in point, So I guess whether it's 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago or now or in future, probably, we are all humans and we have the same series of problems, the same series of confusions as persons. And sooner or later, we reach a point in time in our life where we start asking the questions. Okay, I mean, there are different people who come to know about the knowledge. Those who are generally wise, who want to know. Those who are curious. Those who are suffering. Those who want material advancement, and also even those who don't have any of these interests. Who have money, who are materially okay, who don't have like seemingly problems at one or the other point in time. Each of us still comes across the questions: what is happening? What is the essence of life? We know the people who are materially sort of like okay, but they seriously don't have any sense in life, and then they either go into some bad activities, or they just generally have purposeless life and all. So I guess what Gita gives us is the sense of purpose. The Gita explains to me, for example, particularly to me, it gave me the answer to the question, who I am. We do think about what happens after we die, especially as we grow old, but even in the childhood, you learn the history books and all. I was flabbergasted when I got to know that the whole civilizations which were living in the area of the current Ukraine, they died, and the only thing which is left is the tombs and the golden jewelries, and that's it. So I was totally abashed when the atheist kind of concept couldn't explain what is happening and where people are going, and then why is this really the only thing left and all. So to me, Gita gave the answer to the question where we are going, and also why. A very important question is, like, we are all asking, why am I suffering? I haven't done anything wrong, I mean, if somebody is apparently a rascal and doing bad stuff, that is understandable, right? Oh yeah, God punish him. But me, why me? I'm such a nice person. I haven't done anything bad, so why am I suffering? So Gita explains to you about karma. It explains to you about past lives. It explains to you that this is not the first time you're living. It explains to you about the attachments also. It explains to you why you feel sad, why you feel happy, how to treat sadness, how to treat happiness. So I guess these things, regardless of the age, regardless of the era, they're all personal things which we all need to find the answers sooner or later. And Gita gives the answers in a very concise way and in a very wholesome way. It doesn't only tell you about one thing, it tells you about the whole picture. What are you here? How you're related to this world, how you're related to other people, what is this world? And also, which is a very important thing to me, it also tells you about the higher being, that you can have relationship and then you can end your sufferings. So, well, I guess these are the human kind of questions which Gita gives the answers to.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think that the topic was also it started with "Will I be happy?" of this session, and I think those are the kind of timeless questions that every generation asks, irrespective of thousands of years, and irrespective of their geography, irrespective of their religious beliefs, and I think that's what makes Gita a very unique piece of wisdom available to the humankind, and it's so inspiring to see how both of you have encountered this and made use of it and internalized it in your personal lives. We have some people in the audience who also want to ask questions to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think my given that it is very open, liberal. I read about Gita and understood it is so open, liberal that it is open to interpretation from each of them in the way they want to actually interpret it. So when something is so open and allows itself for multiple interpretations, the ability to teach it in a certain way becomes difficult. So my question to Galina, if I understood, she is coming from a background of pedagogy. If I would like to have this taught to kids, is there a certain way that it can be made relevant to them? And second part of the question is, it's so vast, Gita. So are there some parts that are appropriate for at a school level, then at a college level, and then at a work life level and retirement, so that somebody could actually look at it more from a pedagogical perspective and not from a typical religious or philosophical perspective?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's very interesting. I have not been teaching Gita as a pedagogue to the students like in class, but because I have a small kid, so I do always think of how to explain things in a way which, in a wholesome way, because sometimes the questions which my son is asking me, they're very deep. So I do try to explain the knowledge about Gita in everyday life in the most simple way. Like, for example, there was the point in time when my son was asking me about like death and what's happening, but because he was very small, like 3 years or 4 years, so you can't really tell much. So you have to judge by the situation on what kind of question is coming, or if the question is not coming, then some of the situation you have to step up and explain certain knowledge. So it's really like if I were designed to the course for the children, let's say like K1, K2, like kindergarten kids, about the sort of the knowledge, I would probably go by stories. There was this story which happened to this guy, and then he was confused, and then Krishna came and told him something, and these were the questions. So and also I mean, saying that I haven't been teaching the course to the really small kids, but when the kids grow older, then they are able to handle a little bit more, so you can have like more serious conversations with them about, like, once they overcome this fear of death. Because I noticed that in the early age the kids are very scared of death. I don't know why. Maybe they still remember their past experience or something. So at that point of time, I wouldn't load them with so much of, like theoretical knowledge from the scriptures. Oh, this is what happens. Like in Srimad Bhagavatam in chapter 5, it talks about the hell and all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't go into all those, but I'll just come out with the collection of stories to tell them, like positive stories, how this thing happened and how it was overcome. How, let's say, Arjun, how he was confused, how Krishna resolved his questions and all. When they grow a little bit bigger, like now, I have to teach my son in a slightly different way, in a more serious way already. So I guess we have to judge by the, if I were to design a course for the kids, first of all, I also make sure that I follow the sort of like canonical like from my perspective, from my parampara, I wouldn't go into my own interpretation. I would just take the explanation of Gita given by my spiritual teachers, and I will adapt it to the minds of the kids, and then I will design that according to the age group.
Thanks so much, Galina. I think a lot of application of Gita into education, and I'll come to that later, because Gita itself is also a form of pedagogy of question and answer, which teaches a lot. So next we have Pradeep ji.
So my question is also related to my discussion with children. And I think it will follow very naturally what Galina is right now explaining. So when I do storytelling at home, and at times when I look for stories, I use Mahabharata and Ramayana and several stories which are inbuilt into that. Specifically for Gita, when you introduce Gita to children, it's very difficult because the entire context is a warlike situation. So the question is that whether Gita promotes violence or not. Because when you tell child that, okay, Arjuna doesn't want to fight, but Krishna motivates him to fight. So the simple question children ask, like, why is that? So whether Gita promotes violence under the veil of karma or action is the question. How to resolve that?
So Pradeep ji, how old is your kid?
6 and 16.
If I ask your kid, should you tell lie, would your kid say yes or no?
They will say no.
They will say no.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Should you tell a truth which will take someone's life? And we have this story is actually in Mahabharata. There is a sage called Kaushik. What happens in that story is that there is this sage Kaushik who never tells lie, and a bunch of robbers come and they're asking, have you seen that man? And Kaushik sage says, yeah, I have seen. He is hiding behind that tree. And then Kaushik sage never tells lie in his life, yet goes to hell. And he's asking in Yamraj, why am I going to hell? He's saying, because your truth has never helped anybody. So is killing good or bad? That's your question essentially. See, killing in itself in isolation is bad. But when you are killing for the right reason, sometimes killing is dharma. That is the entire crux of Bhagavad Gita. Killing in itself is not good or bad. Like soldiers are standing on the border. Can they ask this question? Can they afford to ask this question? Shall I kill or shall I not kill? You ask your own son. There are soldiers standing on the border. Should they kill the enemy or not? They will say yes, they should kill. Your own 6-year-old son will say yes. So is Krishna enticing Arjuna to kill? Yes, because if you don't kill, then a gross adharma will be established on the planet. Sometimes killing is dharma. Dharma is not religion. Dharma is establishing what is right.
I would think that Bhagavad Gita doesn't promote violence. Bhagavad Gita promotes fairness. So like there is still the aggression from Russian side on the east part of Ukraine. So there are people who would say, no, you just have to go and pray and things will get solved. But there are people who will say, no, if we don't stop them, tomorrow the whole country will be seized. And then there are also the Krishna devotees who have taken the weapon, and they're not saying we have to go and do the mala and japa mala and chant and wait for Krishna to solve things for us. No, they took the weapons and they are going and supporting the fairness. So this is the principle of fairness. Also, when my son was very small, I can't remember, he was asking some questions, controversial questions. And the best example which I could tell him is like, you take the knife, a knife can be bad, but it can also be good. If the knife is in the hands of the doctor and something has to be like quickly resolved by surgical way with the use of that knife, then the knife is good. But if somebody takes the knife to kill somebody else, then the knife is not bad. So knowledge itself is just the knowledge, But Gita, I would strongly, explain that Gita doesn't support violence. It supports the fairness. So if if somebody is so bad that they can't even give the 10 acres of land just for the people to exercise their dharma as kshatriyas, Even that you refused to do. That was like the last drop, even, I mean, before the Kurukshetra started, Krishna has exhausted, everybody has exhausted all possible ways. They really exhausted all ways. And I'm asking you for 10 square meters, and even that you can't give me. Sorry, even me, like peaceful me, if somebody tells me that, I'll just take the rolling pin and I'll just bash their head. Seriously. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, and thanks to the authors for the answer. And Gita is so fascinating that when we're talking about killing outside, it also prepares us to kill so much of inside. And that's the next question from Rumi Malik. She's asking that how can you share more about the mind training in Gita? How do we kill our expectations? How do we kill our desires, and how do we conquer our anger and all that? So what does Gita tell us about that?
Well, first of all, Arjuna says in Gita that mind is more difficult to control than the burst of the wind. So, so this is how difficult it is. And that is for Arjuna, who was so much advanced in different practices, in self-control and all that. And even for him, he says that it's so difficult to conquer your mind. But so it's extremely difficult. It's equal to impossible, but we still have to do it. The only way to manage is to control yourself and your emotions and your other things is only by doing it. And you can't really suppress all your desires. You can't suppress your aspirations. But the only way to make some change in this direction is to twist the kind of the desire you have. If somebody has the huge desire to attain, that's why people have the practices of charities, those people who are so concentrated on earning money and all, and they're good at that. So there is also a way to give some portion in charity so that you feel that you are doing something good, something with more purpose. So we can't completely suppress our desires. We can't get we can't get totally not angry. But let's say my anger as a mother when my son doesn't do his homework is different to just any kind of anger, So you twist your desire to a positive side. You twist your attainment to a positive side. It's written in the scriptures, and I think it's even in the Gita and in the commentaries to it, that we can't eliminate our desires. We can't eliminate our emotions because this is just natural. But what we can do, we can direct those desires, desire for attainment, desire for other things. Even the negative emotions can be directed in a positive way, slowly.
Very true. Very true. I think there's so much to take out of Gita and contextualize it and teach to students and I mean to anyone. And this is a very interesting insight that you are sharing about training the mind through using the knowledge of Gita. And I want to take it to Rahul for one final question, because you had mentioned that you are mostly into you mostly studied in a Western method of education, and yet you are so closely involved with educational institutions in India. I see that you are closely working with IIM Udaipur. You also studied at IIM Bangalore, and you are the head of their alumni association in Singapore. I want to ask you, what would be your suggestion to the educational system in India? Why we are very interested in this answer is because we ourselves are developing an educational institution at very infancy stage. We just launched, and it is something that is inspired by this timeless wisdom of the Indian knowledge system, of the Indian civilization. So what would be your suggestion to the educational system and educators who are present in this session today?
Number one, stop being apologetic about who you are. I think India's number one problem is that we are too apologetic about who we are. If you look at India, our number one export was not IT. Spirituality was our number one export forever, as long as you go back into the history of this world. So stop apologizing for it, start accepting it, right? That's the number one thing. Number two, you don't need a Western country or a Western world to come and rubber stamp what you already have. I get so many of these WhatsApp forward. According to a research by NASA, why do I need according to NASA, according to Harvard? Why can't it be according to Sahil from Rashtra? Why can't it be according to Shobit from Rishihood? I mean, why should we depend on them? We need to trust our own thing. And number 3, once you have sorted those two, start imparting. You see, India is the only country probably where we do not study our own scriptures, right? I mean, there are more departments of Indic studies of Sanskrit outside India than in India. I hope that answers in some sense.
That's very interesting. So, imbibing, exporting, imparting. So, we can do a lot of this with our precious wisdom available to us. Thanks so much, Rahul, for sharing that. To bring this session to a close, I invite Shobit Mathurji. He's the co-founder of Rashram and the Pro Vice Chancellor of Rishihood University, my senior and colleague, for closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Sahil. Thank you, Mohitji, for inviting me. First of all, thanks to the authors themselves, Rahul and Galina, who have put forward their thoughts so very well. I just want to summarize some of the quick learnings that I have come across in this very enlightening 60 minutes that we have had. Beginning with what Gaurandas Prabhuji had said about we have this tendency to control, consume, compete, and convince. And how the Srimad Bhagavad Gita helps us overcome these tendencies. I think the way it's put it, the 4 C's together, I think was a very good takeaway for me as well. And between the authors, I found it very fascinating that there is one who is born in Ayodhya, so which is perhaps India's most religious city or culturally very important city, but who eventually turned out to be an atheist. And there is one who's born in the USSR, which is actually an atheist country, but turned out to be a very devout follower of Krishna. This huge contradiction, and constantly Galina was telling that, Rahul, you are Western educated. So I was like, okay, but so that is very fascinating, the way the two authors of this book and speakers today, the contradictions that have between them, but how the Bhagavad Gita brought them together. And that just says that the Gita finds a way to reach you. Just like it found a way to reach the erstwhile USSR, it also finds a way to reach all of us. And Rahul said a very good point that we all have access to it. We are born here. Like some of them said that, okay, we are born in Haryana and Kurukshetra, but how often do we read it? How often do we feel that there is a lot of knowledge there that we should assimilate? I think the primary issue there, and that has been highlighted today, is the education system that we have has disconnected us from our own knowledge tradition. And now we have to bring this knowledge back to the so-called modern mind. That is, now you'll have to use logic, rationality, and then somehow say how this knowledge is applicable in your current life, to bring back the same wisdom to our modern educated adults. And I think the book has done an amazing job of it, of whatever I could hear today, that how it brings these ideas to the common man, to the so-called Western modern educated mind. And this book fills a very important gap. Other important things I felt is that Galina mentioned is that you cannot judge dharma as morals, right? So like typically in the Abrahamic faiths, we see commandments that morals have been given. The dharma as a context, it is the right thing to do. That is what sustains and what uplifts the creation. That is the right thing to do. And how artha and kama, which are the two pursuits, should be bound by dharma and moksha. So the Purushartha, which the Gita constantly speaks about, that how we should be bonded in our desires while following dharma and towards moksha. And to close, I think Rahul gave a very good punch, saying that don't look for validation. We have to shed our inferiority complex. The very purpose of India, as all the great rishis have always said, is to spread spirituality to the world. That is the reason we exist. So let's be confident about that and not always look for a Western validation. So thank you, everyone. Thank you particularly to the city book leaders, Mohitji representing them, and Rishihood Rashram. We're glad to be a part of this, and the publishers of this book, Rupa, that have brought out this amazing book for all of us to read. And let's stay in touch and keep learning. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great Sunday and a great year ahead. Just 2 messages before we close. First, please buy the book. The link is there. And if you just Google an atheist gets the Gita, you'll get the link to purchase the book. And secondly, to continue listening to more such sessions, this is the first of the year and we'll have many more around books and around authors. Please join our broadcast list. The link is there in the chat. Thank you so much.